Is Jesus equal to God the Father? What does John 5:18 and Philippians 2:6 have to tell us about this? Can they help us answer the question, is Jesus equal with God the Father? Trinitarians believe Jesus as God the Son is equal to God the Father, as two persons of the three persons that share the divine essence or ousia of the Trinity. So they believe he's co-equal, co-eternal, and co-equal with the Father in every respect. Now, as a man, they would agree that he's not equal with the Father. In fact, they often will use that to explain away or try to explain away texts that clearly show Jesus is not equal to the Father. And yet it's a text where Jesus is a man that Trinitarians often use to try to prove Jesus is equal to God the Father, John 5:18. The other text, Philippians 2:6, everybody agrees it refers to Jesus before he became a man, although Trinitarians try to argue it shows he continued to remain as God when he was a man. And so he has two natures, a human nature and a divine nature, even though the Bible clearly teaches, one, he was the last Adam, 1 Corinthians 15:45, that he became lower than the angels, gods, according to Psalm 8:5, and Hebrews 2:7 and 9. So the Bible does not anywhere teach explicitly that Jesus was a God-man. It teaches that he was a God, with God, in the beginning, and that the sons of God are gods. Even Jesus tells us that, quoting his Father, Psalm 82. I've done several videos on that text, on both texts, to show that we can prove Jesus identified himself as one of the sons of God gods, who are not these other gods out there rivaling their Father. They are their Father when they act or are God to us. Hence, Jesus told his followers in John 14, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I'm going to talk more about that text and a bunch of other texts where Jesus shows, as we'll see in the context of John 5:18 in a moment, that he's only doing the will of the Father. That everything he says, everything he teaches, everything he does is the will, is the works, is the teachings of the Father. So you're not seeing someone else, ever, when you're seeing Jesus, or the other sons of God that the Bible shows appeared as God in the Hebrew Scriptures. Like in the burning bush with Moses, that in the book of Acts says were angels, or that transmitted the law, which Acts says were angels. And that all throughout the Hebrew Scriptures we're told were angels that represent God, whom no one has seen. John 1:18. But the sons of God explain him. They represent him. They show us God through what they do. In that sense, they are the Father. The reason I'm not including this show on whether Jesus is equal to the Father, John 5:18, Philippians 2:6, in my Bible in the Trinity and Conflict series, is because although Philippians 2:6 is a little different, and I have included that in my Bible in the Trinity and Conflict series, I'm bringing that text up in this show because it uses the same term used in John 5:18, isos, equal or like, which we'll discuss further in a moment. So the real focus of this show is going to be John 5:18, although Philippians 2:6 will come up at the end because of that term, isos. But John 5:18 itself, just that verse, isn't in conflict with the Trinity. It's just a question of whether it teaches something consistent with the Trinity or not. Kind of like John 8:58. That's not a verse I'm using as part of the Bible in the Trinity and Conflict series either. I've done a separate video on that. I've done a couple videos, but one exclusively on that text that I clipped from my NWT Morally and Translation is Superior series, part 2. Because that text, again, either teaches Jesus is God or is eternal, or is just pre-existent before Abraham, and that's how he saw him rejoice at his day. So it's not really in conflict with the Trinity. It's just a question of whether or not it teaches it or teaches something consistent with it, which I don't believe it does very clearly. And that's why I talked about it. In the same way, John 5:18 is either consistent or not consistent with the Trinity. But it itself, the surrounding context is another story. But John 5:18 isn't really in conflict with the Trinity, no matter how you see it, at least as I see it. But the context is another story. So I'm going to be bringing up texts from John 14, including John 14:28, the Father is greater than I am, and the earlier part of John 14, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, and John 5:19, which we'll read in a moment, and other texts like John 7:16 and 17, John 12:49 and 50, all of which show, along with texts from John 8, not 8:58, but earlier in John 8, Jesus is only doing the Father's will. He's not doing his will. He's not speaking of his own originality. He's repeating what the Father taught him. The Father's actually working through him. That's how much he's surrendering himself to the Father. So he's not like doing his own divine will in addition to his humanity, submitting to his divine personhood. He's completely lower than the angels, completely lower than gods, the last Adam, doing God's will. So I will do a separate show, The Bible and the Trinity in Conflict, on those texts, John 5:19, John 7:16, 17, John 12:49, 50, and then the John 14 texts. Those are in direct conflict with the Trinity. But John 5:18, the question there really is Jesus equal with God the Father? Let's go ahead and read it. Let's read it in context and see what it says. And then we'll talk about what it means. It really says, it means what it says, but sometimes terms like equal, we have to define, because sometimes when people say equal, they mean one-to-one correspondence, exact in every way, or they mean it's like something in a similar way. John 5, we'll read verses 10 through 20 so we can get a good look at the context. I'll be reading from the New World Translation, of course, because it often comes up in these discussions, and it is far superior than most, if not all, modern English translations of the Bible. For one reason, its use of the divine name, and for another reason, its non-adherence to post-biblical doctrines like the Trinity. It doesn't follow traditions like the Trinity when it comes to translating texts like John 1:1 or other texts in John that I've talked about in my part 2 of that series. Right? So, for example, you might have people in evangelical or Catholic seminaries or schools that are very smart, very educated in Greek, but if you don't follow the tradition of the Trinity, they'll fail you in Greek. Try taking a class from Professor Daniel B. Wallace of Dallas Theological Seminary and translate John 1:1 as the Word was a God, and see what grade you get on that paper. Even if he passes you because you translated according to actual grammar, you're going to get a note, I'm almost positive, that says that's not how you translate John 1:1 and here's why, etc. Trinity. I don't even think you can attend Dallas Theological Seminary unless you agree you accept the Trinity. So just because these people have education is not a reason in and of itself to prefer their translation, because their translations are governed by their traditions. In this case, the Trinity. But in John 5:18, there's really not a dispute when it comes to the translation. Trinitarians don't dispute with the New World Translation in this text, as you'll see, because most translations use the word equal, even though I'm not so sure that's the best term to use. It is in one sense, as I will explain, because again, there are specific ways in which you can be equal with someone without being equal in every way. And in this text, in this context, that's the case. There's a very specific way, just like in Philippians 2 that we'll get to in a moment. that Jesus is claiming, or that he is being viewed as claiming to be equal with the Father. But not in every way. But again, the term equal sometimes confuses people. We'll talk about it. First, let's read the texts. John 5:10 through 20. Therefore, the Jews began to say to the cured man, "It is Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to carry the cot." This is a man that Jesus had previously healed. And so the Jews are confronting him as he's carrying his cot that he formerly used before he was healed. But the healed man answered the Jews, he said, "The very one that made me sound in health said to me, 'Pick up your cot and walk.'" He's talking about Jesus. So they, the Jews, asked the healed man, "Who is the man that told you, 'Pick it up and walk'?" Right? Because it's Sabbath, and they're making life harder on people, right? They're burdening people over God's laws instead of following God's laws in a way that isn't necessary because it burdens people in a way that God did not intend. But that's what ends up happening, right? These traditions overload people the way that the Jews back then enforced them, to the point to where even a healed man couldn't carry his cot away from where he previously was lame. The healed man did not know, verse 13, who he was, that is, who Jesus was. For Jesus had turned aside after he healed this man, there being a crowd in the place, right? So he heals this man, then he leaves, turns aside, and so the man can't identify him in the crowd. The Jews want to know who it was that told him to go ahead and do this. Who said to pick up your cot and walk on the Sabbath with it? Verse 14, after these things, Jesus found him, that's the healed man, in the temple and said to him, so Jesus is coming back to this man after this man had this encounter with the Jews. And Jesus says, "See, you've become sound in health. Do not sin anymore, in order that something worse does not happen to you." Verse 15, the man went away and told the Jews it was Jesus that made him sound in health, right? So now he can identify Jesus, and he knows the Jews want to know who was that man. So now Jesus comes back to him, checks on him, says, "You've been healed, don't sin anymore, or it'll get worse." So then the man goes and tells the Jews. Verse 16, so on this account the Jews went persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things, like healing, on or during the Sabbath. Verse 17, but he, that is Jesus, answered them, "My Father has kept working until now, and I keep working." He's making a parallel here, isn't he? He's making an equivalence, basically saying, well, my Father's working, so I keep working. Right? In other words, if he does it, I'm going to do it. Does that remind you of anything? It reminds me of the very text that I was speaking of earlier at the start of this video, about the next video I'll do in my Bible and the Trinity and Conflict series. Text that we'll read in a moment in verse 19, and in John 7, 16, 17, John 8, John 12, John 14. I learn from the Father and I teach. What I see from the Father, I do. The Father's kept working, so I keep working. He keeps working and I keep working too. That's the context. That's what's being talked about right before our subject verse, at least our main one. Verse 18, on this account, the Jews began seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, right, the healing part from earlier, but now Jesus has said this part about working and my Father. And so if he's working, I keep working. He was also calling God his own Father, making himself equal to God. Now, before we even go further and let Jesus explain what he means, he answers them just like he does in John 10, 33 and 30 through 36. about a very similar accusation that they make in part correct but in part incorrectly because they don't understand his role as the sent forth one of God, the Son of God. They reject him. What is the context? What was the equivalence Jesus made in verse 17? He calls him his Father, right? My Father. So there's something there that gets them, right? Calling God his own Father. But in what sense does he call him his Father, right? So obviously he's a son of God. If you're calling God your Father in a direct sense, you're saying what? You're a son of God. It's not possible for you to call God your Father and you not be a son of God. And he explains that because of that relationship, because he's the Father and I'm a son of God, and he keeps working, so I keep working. In other words, the sons of God do what their Father does. Jesus tells us that over and over and over in the text I referred to earlier. The wicked sons of God, Satan being the preeminent one, do not do what the Father does. He's still their Father. He gave them life, right? They're still sons of God in that sense. But they're not like this. They don't talk about him being their Father and then working and doing what he does. Now look at verse 19. All right, so the Jews hear this, and they hear this, my Father has kept working, so I keep working. In other words, he's going to keep doing what God does in this special relationship way that wouldn't apply in every sense according to the law because there's certain things you're not supposed to do on the Sabbath. But Jesus' relationship with the Father is not only more pure in the sense that he understands what that means, it's more direct. Right? He's been sent by God. Right? John started out his account explaining Jesus was with God in the beginning, just like the other sons of God, Job 38:7. And that he was sent by God, whom no man has seen, John 1:18, to explain him. And he's doing his works, right? It even says in John 14, the Father who is in me is doing his works. So he doesn't have a choice unless he wants to disobey the Father. They see that as him making himself equal to God. Now, again, does equal always mean equal? Not really. In fact, let's go ahead and just pull up the meaning of equal in the Common English Merriam-Webster's online dictionary to show that even in English, by equal, we don't always mean equal. Right here, you can see Standard English Dictionary, definition of equal, of the same measure, quantity, amount, identical in mathematical value, like in quality, nature, or status. Like for each member of a group, class, or society. So even when it comes to just the standard usage of English, which is what we're talking about when we use English translations, right? The range of meanings for equal do not always involve one-to-one, 100% in every single way equal. So what about Greek? Well, here is a standard Greek lexicon. Liddell and Scott. Classical Greek. Also uses examples from the Septuagint and New Testament Greek. On page 839, under isos. It starts out and says equal in size, strength, or number. And then if you just look down, the typing is kind of small, so you have to kind of go line by line. And I don't like to underline certain of my texts. But you'll see that it says copy of a document like. So right there on page 839, it uses both, just like in Merriam-Webster's online. Equal, and then just scrolling down a few lines from the top part where it uses equal, it uses like. It's too small for me to show you in print, but you can see it for yourself. So we have both definitions in both the Standard English Dictionary and in one of the longest standing standard Greek dictionaries in existence. Isos does not always mean 100% equal. And I'm going to show in just a moment that we don't just need the dictionaries to tell us that. The usage of the term in the New Testament and the Greek Old Testament and in the Apocrypha, books that are included in some of the collections of ancient biblical books and that have a lot of value, that are just not considered canonical by most Protestants and Catholics. Well, Catholics would consider many of them canonical. But either way, they're not usually accepted by everybody as canonical, but they're still historical. They're still works of ancient Greek that show the usage of terms. Before we get to that, let's read the last two verses of our subject text in context. Right, so we know now that English and Greek lexical sources define equal and isos, the term used here in Greek and the term used here in English, and in most English translations, can mean equal, one-to-one, or like, similar, like in nature. Look at Jesus' answer in verse 19, right? So we have the Jews again listening to what he said. My Father has kept working until now, and I keep working. And the Jews interpret that as him calling God his own Father, making himself equal, isos, to God. What does Jesus say in response? The same problem Trinitarians have in John 10, 33 through 36. They fail to listen to Jesus' answer. In fact, they reject it. They adopt in both John 10 and John 5 the Jews' position and understanding of what Jesus said, which, while it may be accurate in some sense, it's not an accurate understanding entirely when you look at Jesus' answer, right? If it was accurate, Trinitarians, if what the Jews surmised in John 5:18 was all that needed to be said, why would he go on and answer them like this? Or like he does in John 10 by quoting Psalm 82 to explain what he meant. Look, therefore, let me bring it up for you guys. Therefore, in answer, Jesus went on to say to them, most truly I say to you, the Son cannot do a single thing of his own initiative, but only what he beholds the Father doing. For whatever things that one does, these things the Son also does in like manner. In fact, if we pull up the Greek text of John 5:18, we could go to the Bible Hub, but I'll do it right now. And if you look at John 5, well, maybe we'll look at the Bible Hub, but I'm going to just check it real quick. While it uses isos in verse 18, in Jesus' answer in verse 19, it uses homoios, like. So Jesus explicitly ties the Greek term for like Like, as in, it's like, not exact, but like. Homoios. The Son does in like manner. Trinitarians. So while the Jews understood that as him making himself isos with God based on him working until now, and there is a sense in which Jesus could be and was, in my view, isos or equal like God. We'll get to it in a moment. Certainly here in this context, he's equal or like God in working because the Father keeps working. And he says right here, I can't do anything of my own. I watch the Father. I behold what the Father is doing. And whatever he does, I do in like manner. I copy him. I follow his lead. So temporally, they're not equal, are they? The Father does things first, and then the Son does them in like. Homoios. Verse 19, Trinitarians. Son doesn't do anything of himself. Trinitarians, does the Father do anything of himself? He does everything of himself, doesn't he? So how could they be equal in the exact one-to-one sense? They're about as far from that as you could possibly be. Because the Son doesn't do anything until he sees the Father doing things. Trinitarians, once again, you have completely misunderstood this text. And you falsely teach it's consistent with what's next, the Trinity. It's not. Verse 19 is clearly in conflict with the Trinity, which is why it'll be a part of my Bible in the Trinity and Conflict series coming up. But verse 18, the Jewish understanding of what Jesus says in verse 17, has to be understood in light of verse 19, because that's Jesus' answer, Trinitarians. Do you follow Jesus or not? Oh, you do. Okay. Then you know he doesn't do anything of his own. The same Jesus who's being said to be equal with God or have made himself equal with God, that same Jesus. There's not two Jesuses, Trinitarians. I'm sorry. Not even two natures in one Jesus, which would be two Jesuses, no matter what you want to claim, because one would know all things and the other not know all things, and that can only be in two centers of consciousness, not one. But we know you just abandon reason and logic at that point, and it's nothing that's taught in these texts. Look at the text, Trinitarians. Jesus explains exactly what he's talking about, or what he meant in verse 17 that the Jews said was making himself equal to God in verse 18, in verse 19. Son can't do anything, Trinitarians, until he sees the Father do it first. Father's first, Trinitarians. Then Jesus watches what the Father does and copies him and does the things the Father does in like manner. Homoios. Jesus makes it explicit that isos in verse 18 is homoios, Trinitarians. Like in Webster's, like in Liddell Scott, isos can mean equal in size, number, and quantity, but also it can mean like. Like, similar, Trinitarians. Like when you copy someone who does something, you might even do it exactly the way someone does, and so in that sense, it's equal, right? But not in every sense, because you did it after, Trinitarians. You did it later if you copied someone. If you saw someone doing something, and then you did it in like manner, even if you did it exactly in the same way, the equality is not inclusive of the time, Trinitarians. It's temporally not equal. It may be formally equal, right? Like the manner in which you're doing something. But even that usually has a few differences, right? You're not ever exactly the same as someone. But let's just grant that the Son can copy exactly what the Father does, right? They're able to, because they're perfect. The spirit beings, in this case the Son of God, unlike us, we're not perfect. We can't always copy someone exactly. It's still after they do it. So it's not an equality of temporality, Trinitarians. It's an equality of works, of action, of the things the Son sees the Father doing, even in creation, I would say. Right? He says, whatever things that one does. So the Father could show the Son how to make stuff that he created, right? All things are out of the Father. And then the Son helps put them together. Proverbs 8, just like a carpenter's son. Hebrews 1, 10 through 12. Septuagint reading of Psalm 102. That shows the pre-existent Son as wisdom puts things together. He's never the one who creates things out of himself. He puts together things that came out of the Father's self. That's why Colossians 1:16 uses the passive form of katizo, ektiste, for what the Father does through the Son. The Son is never the active creator, Trinitarians, and you know it. The Father is. And then the Son, after the Father shows him how to put things together, does the same thing. Whatever things, Trinitarians, whatever the Son does in like manner, homoios, in explaining isos to God. Verse 20, for the Father has affection for the Son and shows him. Trinitarians, if someone shows you something, did you see it before you saw it? No. No, the one who's showing you saw it before showing it to you, and then that's when you saw it. The temporality difference is all over the place. And shows him all the things he himself does, and he will show him works greater than these in order that you may marvel. It's the Father, Trinitarians! The Father's the one who starts it first. The Son is not co-eternal with the Father, so the Son doesn't see everything the Father does first. The Father has to do it, and then the Father shows it. Shows it to the Son, Trinitarians. Because the Son didn't see it, and the Son didn't do it co-eternally with the Father. That's why the Son has to watch the Father and then do things in like manner. Homoios, in explaining isos in the context of John 5:18. Now let's take a look at other texts that show us the same thing. Matthew 20, verse 10. Verse 12. Right, so this is the illustration that Jesus gave about the workers in the vineyard and how there were different workers at different times of the day who all agreed to work for him for the same wage. But then at the end of the day, the people that worked longer but got the same wage as the people who worked less time come to Jesus and complain. And they said in verse 12, these last, the ones you hired last, put in 1 hour's work. Still, you made them equal to us, who bore the burden of the day and the burning heat. Right? Equal to us. They're talking about the pay. That's true. In the context, right? Well, that's the same thing you have in John 5:18. Equal to God. But in the context, what's it talking about, Trinitarians? The works the Father's doing that the Son does in imitation of the Father in like, homoios, manner. So in John 5:18, the Jews understood him saying the Father keeps working, so he keeps working, as making himself equal to God. But the context is talking about equal in the sense of doing the works that the Father does, which Jesus goes on to explain explicitly in verse 19. In the same way, the Greek says, made them equal to us. It doesn't say made them equal to us in pay in the text using isos. You have to get that from the context. So in the same way, we know that not every person is equal to every person, right? We're not all the same. We have the same nature, right? Human nature. But we're not all the same age, are we? We're not all the same smarts, are we? We're not all the same strength, are we? So it's talking about something contextually specific, equal to us in terms of the pay. John 5:18, it's very obvious Jesus' answer. He shows the Father and he are not equal because he has to wait until the Father does stuff, does nothing of himself, and then does those same things in like manner. Not even 1-to-1, 100% correspondence unless he imitates him perfectly, which is possible, but it's still not temporally equal. And it's talking about the works of the Father, not his divine nature. And even if it was, like it is in Philippians 2, equal doesn't always mean equal, like we showed in English and in Greek sources, lexical sources, and as I'm going to show further by example. But here you can see that isos is clearly definable according to the context. Otherwise, we would have to think these people are all equal in every single way, the way Trinitarians want us to believe the Father and the Son are co-equal in every way in their divinity. Okay, that's not what it says in John 5:18, and that's not what it says in Matthew 20:12, even though you could just, if you isolate, made himself equal to God, made them equal to us. Well, that's if you just took it and ripped it out of its context, you can make it mean whatever you want. That's why we don't interpret text that way, Trinitarians, and you know it. We interpret them in context, and you know it. You just blow it because you need your doctrine to fit with the text regardless of the context. Let's show another example. Luke 20:36. Luke chapter 20, verse 36. Here Jesus is talking about the resurrection, right? He's answering a challenge by the Jews, the Sadducees specifically, who talk about how if a woman has more than one man, how many, to whom will the woman be married in the resurrection? And so Jesus says that in verse 34, the children of this system of things marrying are given in marriage, but those who have been counted worthy of gaining that system of things in the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. In fact, neither can they die anymore, but they are like angels. The Greek is isangelos. It's a compound word, combining isos, the same term in John 5:18, and angelos, angel. Isangelos. It's the only time it's used in the New Testament. But it means equal to angels. Right? Again, isos and angelos. Well, how could they be equal to angels in the exact same sense in every respect? Right? Let's just say that this is the resurrection to spirit life. Right? You could say to human life, and they're just equal to angels in the sense that they don't marry the way angels don't marry, right? Because they're neither male nor female. Or they just don't marry the way humans do that are male and female. But if you see either one, right? If you say this applies to the physical resurrection, they're not equal to angels in every respect, right? Angels are spirit beings. Humans are made lower than the angels. So that would be the easiest one. But let's now take it another direction and say that this refers to the resurrection in the spirit. Like angels are spirits. They're still not 100% equal, are they? Who was spirit longer? The angels, right? The angels are obviously older spirits than those who are resurrected here, if it's resurrection in the spirit. So once again, you have isos. It's very obvious if it's the physical resurrection, right? But in a spiritual sense, they're not equal to the angels in their age. Nor would they be equal to the angels in terms of all the things they know about the metaphysical realm. But Trinitarians often say Jesus is equal to the Father, and that means that he's equal in terms of being eternal. Right? They'll even say in Hebrews 1:3, when it explicitly states that he was stamped into existence as the character tes hypostaseos, copy of God's being, they'll say, well, that if he's a copy, he's exactly like him, right? He's equal to him in every way, eternal. Even though the very words show he's not eternal, character, if you're a copy is never the same age as the original Trinitarian. It just gets so ridiculous, doesn't it? It does. I'm not forced laughing. Every time I think about these arguments and thoughts, it's just like dumb. I can't believe they've actually come to this point where they have to argue that a character tes hypostaseos means that he's copied onto the Son his age. That eternality was copied onto him. That's never the case with any use of character ever, anywhere in any Greek literature, that it means the character is the same age as the thing it's a copy of. But Trinitarians, right, rather than accept the meaning of the text, they have to just make up this idea that you can copy age onto something. And so we can see right here that if the resurrected ones are equal, here we're doing, there in Hebrews 1:3, it's so explicit, it's a joke, right? That's the whole point of being a copy, Trinitarians. The whole point of being a character is that you're not the same age as the original. Well, even going to a text where it uses isos, isangelos, equal to angels. You wouldn't be equal to the angel in your age. You're not resurrected into the spirit life and the same age as the angels. So it means you're equal to the angels in that you're a spirit like the angels. And so you don't marry. If it's talking about the spirit resurrection, not the physical. And the physical is just so obvious, right? You're still not the same age. You're not even the same nature. You just don't marry. And so you're equal to the angels in that sense. See how it's context specific, everyone? And the Trinitarians regularly they talk a lot about context, right? Oh, they talk a great game when it comes to contextual understanding. And then they absolutely abandon the whole process for their later doctrine. And it's not character tes hypostaseos. It's homoousios. Same essence. A non-biblical term from hundreds of years after the Bible. That's what they do. Okay, that's what you need to know about the Trinitarians. They'll read the Bible and then explain it in light of their doctrine. And so when they see made himself equal to God, must mean Trinity. Can't just mean the works that Jesus talks about, imitating the Father in like manner, homoios, verse 19. No, it has to mean, exactly the same, 100% Godhead. Right? He's a man there, but now he's talking about his divinity in all respects there because it uses the phrase equal to God. Now it must mean Trinity. All right, or character tes hypostaseos, Hebrews 1:3. Must copy onto him the same age. So he's a copy, but he's an eternal copy. Oh, okay. Yeah, great. It never means that, ever, anywhere. The whole point of the term is to not mean that, and you say that's what it means. Incredible and ridiculous. And I will argue even blasphemous, because you're denying the Bible in preference for your later doctrine, and the Jesus of the Bible just isn't good enough for you. The characterites hypostaseos is not good enough for you. You believe another Jesus because you reject the Jesus who's good enough for you. Let's go to another example. Let's go to the Septuagint, Numbers 12:12. So the Greek Septuagint, a translation of the Hebrew Aramaic Old Testament, provides us with a wealth of information for the usage of terms that would have also been familiar in many cases to the writers of the New Testament, and so in many cases would have informed their understanding. Numbers 12:12. I'm reading the Hebrew translation, but I'm going to talk about the Greek translation and where it differs from the Hebrew translation of the NWT. I'll point it out. Numbers 12:12, but in many cases they're similar, so I can use them both. Please do not let her continue. Okay, so this account's talking about Aaron and Miriam and how they were undermining Moses, claiming that that Yahuwah could speak to anyone he wants, so why is it always Moses? But they didn't understand that there was a special appointment by Moses, that God spoke to him face to face. And while Moses even didn't sometimes listen, if God wanted to talk or appoint another prophet, he says in the context, he would tell them in a dream that's the case. Not so with Moses. He goes right to him, face to face. So this is Yahuwah, or really the angel of Yahuwah, right, representing Yahuwah, telling them, or he tells them in this context, they shouldn't be undermining Moses. And he punishes Miriam, strikes her with leprosy. And so Aaron goes and pleads to Moses, right here in verse 11. He goes, "Excuse me, my Lord," he's talking to Moses, "do not please attribute to us the sin in which we have acted foolishly, in which we have committed." And Aaron goes in and says, "Please do not let her continue like someone dead." In the Greek text, it says like someone equal to death. Now it says like equal in the Greek, Hosei isan thanato. So it's a little bit different than just using isos, but like we saw in John 5:18, that's in the context of hamoios. So it's actually somewhat similar to John 5:18 and 19, where isos and hamoios are used together to explain what Jesus is talking about. Here we get a similar combination of a term meaning like, ose, and a form of isos, ison. Ose, ison, thanato. Like equal to death. Although Miriam was not equal to death, was she? She had leprosy. So she was like death in her disease. She wasn't equal to death, right? Being equal in 100% correspondence in every way would mean you're actually dead, right? You're not conscious, you're not alive. She was still alive. So that's why it says like equal. And that's why in John 5:18 and 19 we get equal to God in like manner. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy 13. 6 or 7, because the Septuagint's a little bit different from the Hebrew text. Deuteronomy 13. We'll read verse 6 because it's verse 6 in the Hebrew text, but it's verse 7 in the Greek. And notice it says, "In case your brother, the son of your mother, or the son of your daughter, or your cherished wife or companion, who is like your own soul." In the Greek, it says, right, it says your companion who is like your soul in the Hebrew, translation of the NWT. The Greek says, haphilos haisos te sukesu. So, the friend, the equal of your soul. would be the literal word-for-word translation of the Greek. But is someone else the exact 100% correspondent equal of your soul? Right? The soul, man becomes a living soul when what? When you're born. Right? The combination of your physical being with your breath of life, your spirit. So we're not equal to each other in our soul. We're similar, right? We're like, and in this case, that's what it's talking about. That's why in the Hebrew, translation, NWT and others, is like, not equal. Even though the Greek text says isos, equal, the equal of your soul. So again, clearly to me, it shows the usage that we showed already, by example, from the New Testament and the Greek Old Testament, and from English and lexical sources, that equal does not always mean equal 100% in every respect. It's contextually specific, and here referring to the likeness of the desire towards each other that they may have. It's not talking about being exactly equal in age or strength or knowledge. It's talking about the potential desire that you would have with your companion. Let's take a look now at Job 5:14. And again, I'll read the English translation of the Hebrew, but then I'll bring in the Greek so we don't have to bring in all these different texts in ways that aren't as easy to show, but that I can explain as we go through each one. Job 5:14, we're showing by usage the meaning of isos, equal or like. Job 5:14, English translation of the Hebrew, they encounter darkness even by day, and they grope about at midday as if at night. The Greek says equal to night. In other words, they grope about at midday because of the way that Yahuwah catches the wise in their own cunning, and the counsel of the astute ones is carried headlong. He frustrates the schemes of the shrewd even by day. They grope about at midday, equal to night. So what does it mean here? The equality is what? Is midday equal to night? No. The groping about at midday is the same type of groping about you would do at night when you can't see. He confuses the wise and frustrates the schemes of the shrewd, even at midday, so that they grope about as if equal to night. Again, contextually specific, not equating things in all respects. Let's go to another text in Job. There's several instances in Job. Job 10:10. It's talking about, out of the clay you've made me, and to the dust you will make me return. Did you not proceed to pour me out as milk itself, and like cheese to curdle me? Curdle meaning separate or aggregate, like in clumps of cheese. Right? Pouring out as milk, or separating as cheese in the womb of your mother. Equal to cheese is what the Greek says. Isos. Obviously, the human unborn child, or even born, if that's the application to the point at birth when the separation takes place, the curdling. Either way, in either place, in or outside the mother's womb, it's not exactly 100% in every respect equal to cheese, is it? It's like cheese, Trinitarians. It's similar to the process of curdling cheese. Job 11:12. Even a hollow-minded man himself will get good motive, as soon as an asinine zebra be born a man. In the Greek, it says, mortal born of woman is equal to a donkey in the desert. A mortal born of woman is isos to a donkey in the desert. Do I even need to explain that shows we're talking about likeness, about similarity, not equality, in this case even of nature, right? It's a different flesh. Just like Paul explains in 1 Corinthians 15, there's a flesh of animals, flesh of birds, flesh of humans. So it's different. Humans are not donkeys. We're not equal to donkeys. Yet the Greek text says equal to a donkey. It means like a donkey. Just like we've shown, isos can mean like or equal. Job 13:28, as I said, there's several instances of isos in Job. It's used the most in this book of the Septuagint. Job 13:28. And he is like something rotten that wears out. Talking about man. Like a garment that a moth actually eats up. In the Septuagint, it says that which becomes old, equal, isos, to a wineskin. Right? Like a wineskin, a leather wineskin that gets wrinkled, gets cracked and wrinkled. A man becomes old like a wineskin, especially in a parched desert, right? Equal to a wineskin. Is our age, our aging, equal to a leather wineskin? No, it's similar. In desert areas, where if it ages to a point where it gets cracked and wrinkly, it can resemble a wineskin. Job 27:16. I'll just kind of move down here using my roll pad since it moves quickly. Job 27:16. If he should pile up silver like dust itself, and he should prepare a tire just as if clay. This last part, prepare a tire or clothes as if clay. In the Greek text, it says pile gold equal to clay. In the Hebrew, it uses the term K, which is why the NIV and the NWT, well, the NWT doesn't use like here, but the NIV uses like to translate the Hebrew term K, which in the Septuagint is isos, equating gold with clay. Gold equal to clay. It's not talking about gold being the same thing as clay. It's talking about piling up gold like clay. Right? It's not always even the case. Even the piles aren't always, would you always have piles of gold the same as clay? No, it's talking about how you accumulate things. The way you might pile up clay or soil, dirt. You can pile up gold. It's like. It's not equal in 100% correspondence, but it says specifically gold equal to clay. Job 28:2, just a couple verses down. Iron itself is taken from the very dust, and from stone copper is being poured out. In the Greek text, it reads a little differently. Clothe myself with judgment equal to a double cloak. So, is judgment equal in every way to a double cloak, a mantle? No. It's talking about a similarity. How you would clothe yourself with judgment. You'd surround yourself with judgment like you surround yourself with a cloak, a double cloak, the way the Greek text reads. Diplos, I believe is the term. So again, it uses isos in a sense meaning similar to. You would clothe yourself with judgment similar to how you would cloak yourself. Last text from Job, 30:19. He has brought me down to the clay so that I may show myself like dust and ashes. The Greek text says, you regarded me equal to clay. And while we're made from clay, dust of the earth, we're not equal to clay, are we? We're more than clay. We're more than clay, both in terms of our constituent form, what we're made up of entirely, and the form in which it takes is not equal to the constituency and form of clay in proportional quantities. And we're more than clay. We have a spirit. We're a soul. We have the breath of life animating our clay, making us alive. Clay doesn't have that. Yet it says in the Greek Septuagint of Job 30:19, you regard me equal, isos, to clay. So once again, we're talking about a likeness, like in the NWT's translation of the Hebrew, so that I show myself like dust and ashes. Now let's take a look at Proverbs 25:10. In the Greek text, we'll read the translation of the NWT from the Hebrew, and then I'll talk about the Greek and the way we've been doing with these other texts from the Old Testament. Proverbs, that's Psalms 25:10. And here it reads, we'll start in verse 9. Plead your own cause with your fellow man and do not reveal the confidential talk of another, that the one listening may not put you to shame, and the bad report by you can have no recall. The Greek reads a little bit differently, and it states, the friend, the one who's fighting with you, will be to you equal to death. Ise thanato. Is the friend who's quarreling with you equal to death? The same death that will be done away with, according to 1 Corinthians 15? Death, where is your sting? No, that's not the same thing. It doesn't even say that the friend would be killing you, but only quarreling or fighting with you in the context of this text. So the friend, even if a friend later kills you, the friend is not equal to death. The friend who fights with you is like death because of the effect it has on you while you're alive, a tormenting effect, a difficulty. But it's not, your friend is not equal to death. But that's what the Greek says. Ise thanato. Now, let me read to you an example from the Apocrypha, from the Book of Wisdom, which is an ancient text, which has a lot of value. It's just not part of the official canon in the Protestant Bible. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have accurate information, and it certainly doesn't mean we can't use it as a source for Greek usage. That's exactly what we should use it for, because it's from a similar time to the biblical books that we do accept, and it uses Greek from those times that can show us how terms were used and what they meant. In the Book of Wisdom, I'm going to read from Brenton's translation, chapter 7, verse 1. It says, and this is Solomon talking, right? It's called the Wisdom of Solomon. I myself also am mortal man, like to all. Anthropos, isos, hapasi. A man equal to all. Brenton translates it, a mortal man like to all. And is it not obvious that there's no way Solomon or any man could be equal to all? Right? Is Solomon equal to all as a mortal man in age? No. Is he equal in strength to all men in power? No. Is he equal to all men in terms of his wisdom? No. He's talking about his mortality, is he not? In the context, it talks about also the way he's born like all men. He's talking about a similarity, Trinitarians. Anthropos, isos, hapasi does not mean equal in the sense of equal in all respects, and certainly not in age, power, or wisdom. It's context specific to being equal in mortality. Just like in John 5:18, the context is talking about Jesus being equal or like the Father in watching what he does and then doing the same things in like homoios manner. Verse 19. It really couldn't be more obvious when you read the context of John 5:18, could it? So I hope these uses of the term make it even more clear, in addition to the context of John 5:18, the lexical sources we read from English and Greek, that isos really rarely means equal. And I don't know about rarely, I mean, it's used a lot for dimensional equality, like the way that certain things were built to be equal to the other. So it does have a number of uses that mean equal in size, number, or quantity. But really, when it's involving persons, it often does not mean that. It means similar. It means like, according to what's under discussion in the context. Now let's take a look at a commentary at the Bible Hub for John 5:18 and see what it has to say. So here we have the Bible Hub, and we have several commentaries. Here on the right side we have Meyer's New Testament commentary. One of the commentaries that gets more interactive with the Greek, as you can even see from the replication of material from the printed commentary. Here's the expression from John 5:18, equal, making himself equal to God. It says, Ison heauton, and then kai ta loipa, meaning and the rest. And then a comment is given afterward, not an explanation nor exactly a proof of what precedes, which the words themselves of Jesus, ha pater mu, the Father of me, supply. But what Jesus says of God's relation to him, patera idion, his own Father or own Father, declares at the same time as to the other side of the relationship. What he makes himself out to be in his relation to God, we must translate, since he at the same time puts himself on the same level with God, i.e. by that kago ergazomai, and I keep working, and I am working, of John 5:17, wherein he as the Son claims for himself equality of right and freedom with the Father. Not equality of nature, Trinitarians. Compare also Hoffman, the thought of claiming equality of essence, Philippians 2:6, however, lies in the background as an indistinct notion in the minds of his opponents. I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure that his opponents in John 5:18 had the notion of equality of essence in the back of their mind in light of the context of verse 17, talking specifically about how he keeps working. However, the my Father part, and the fact that verse 18 does say calling God his own Father, that could be consistent with equality of essence in the background, right? Not equality of essence in the sense of the Trinity, right? Because the Trinity didn't even exist at this point. What did exist was the relationship between the Father and the sons of God. Genesis 6, Job 1, Job 2, Psalm 82, which Jesus quotes in his own defense in John 10 to explain what he means by calling himself a God, theos. So there is an essence relationship in that they're the same spirit nature. Jesus is a spirit, or was a spirit, before he became a man. But he's talking about his relationship to the Father, not just as a man, right? Because he's doing things he saw the Father do when he was with him in heaven, and maybe also while he's a man. But he says explicitly in John 7:16 and 17, that what he learned from the Father, he's teaching here. He's come forth from the Father, John 8, and now he's telling us the Father's will. He didn't come of his own will. That's before he was a man. The not coming of his own will part, right? Because if you're a man, you've already come. You're already here. So, what is Meyer getting at here in referencing Philippians 2, right? So we already know clearly Meyer makes it explicit that he believes the equality being spoken of in John 5:18 is to be interpreted in light of John 5:17, and that is an equality of right and freedom with the Father because he keeps working the same way that the Father, his Father, keeps working, which is Jesus' whole point in verse 17, that he goes on to explain in verse 19 that he watches what the Father does, and then he does those things in like manner, homoios, like. It's explicitly associated with doing things in like manner after he observes the Father doing them. Let's go to Philippians 2. We'll take a look at it in the Bible Hub. And let's just talk about it for a moment. Philippians 2. I've written about it, of course, in my Jehovah's Witnesses Defended editions. You can get my second and third edition at ElihuBooks.com. And I've done videos on Philippians 2 in my Bible and the Trinity and Conflict series. You can see those in the link below, playlist for that series. So let's just go ahead and read the NIV for a moment. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And so as you know, in my writings and in my video, I don't agree with the New World Translation's rendering of Philippians 2:6 that states basically he did not consider grasping at equality with God, although he existed in morphe theou, in the form of God or of a God. It doesn't use the article, so it could mean either one. But we know Jesus was a God with the article in John 1:1. So he can't be that God he's with. Not possible. Trinity is not to be used to interpret that text because that text is not consistent with the Trinity. It uses theos for the Son, that's the nominative form, and it uses ton theon, or ho theos in the nominative form, for the Father that the Jesus is with. He's a separate God, not just a separate person. That's why it separates them in terms of theos, not person. So I disagree, as you know from my writings and my video on Philippians 2:6 with the NWT. In the translation, he did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped. The reason is because of the idiom in use there, I believe, involving the double accusative that I explained in my writings and video. You should check those out for more extended discussion. So I agree with much of the NIV in this text in terms of the equality being something Jesus already has with God, being in the form of God. The equality being he has the same form, the same type of nature. He's a spirit. He's a God with God, a spirit. God is a spirit, John 4:24. And Jesus is a spirit in the beginning with God and after his resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15:45. The angels are spirits, Hebrews 1:7, quoting the Psalms. So they all have a equality or similarity, likeness, just as we have shown in our review of all those uses of isos, used here in Philippians 2, as well as the lexical sources from the English and Greek, so that just because equal or equality is used, that does not mean a one-to-one, in every respect, equal correspondence. In fact, it often does not mean that, just like we showed. And just like is clear from the context of John 5:18, which even the commentary by Meyer agrees is not one of essence. Although when we get to Philippians 2, we're talking about nature here, right? Because this is en morphe theou. Morphe can mean nature or the exterior form as reflected by that nature, right? So if you have a spirit nature, you have a spirit form. If your nature is spirit, you look like a spirit. It's your form. It's your underlying nature. So Jesus, this is talking about his pre-existence before he became a man, who being in very nature, right, and existing being does not mean non-stop existing in this nature, as Trinitarians like to say. Because being in a nature or existing in a nature is qualified in the context by making himself nothing. The who right here is the himself, which is made nothing by taking the nature of a servant. He doesn't retain this nature and take on this nature. He has this nature. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and then he makes himself nothing. He gives up this nature. That's making yourself nothing, and takes on this nature. The Word became flesh in human likeness and appearance as a man. So here we're talking about him before he does this. In this form, in this nature of a God, or God, right? Because it's the same nature. It's spirit. God is a spirit. John 4:24. That's his nature. Jesus is a copy of that nature. Hebrews 1:3. The character, tes, hypostaseos. So he has, according to the NIV, and I believe correctly, he has an equality with God, or with a God. Because again, this is God without the article. But it could be God here because again, God is a spirit. Jesus is existing as a spirit, as a God. Like God or equal with God. As we have shown, isos can mean. So he has this likeness or equality of form, right? It's context specific. It's not talking about equality in every sense that you can be equal with God. We know that because it specifically refers to morphe, form or nature. It's not talking about age or power or knowledge. It's talking about your nature. Right? Just in the same sense that we showed that isangelos can mean for those who are resurrected, if in the spirit, are equal to angels. Because they're spirits like angels. Doesn't make them the same age as the angels. They're not as knowledgeable as the angels because they were just resurrected to the spirit realm. How could they have that unless all of the knowledge that's ever achievable is communicated directly upon resurrection? It's context specific to not marrying like the angels, equal to angels. Here, same thing. It's the nature that we're talking about. Spirit. Well, the angels are spirits. If you're resurrected into the spirit, you're equal to angels, but not in every respect. Jesus is equal to God, this equality, or a God, because they're all spirits. He did not consider that equality something to be used to his own advantage. In other words, like Satan, considered that equality with God as a spirit to take advantage of God by interfering with God's works and taking from God the worship and praise that is due to him, even seeking it from Jesus. So he's taking advantage of that nature, of that spirit equality with God. Jesus did not. That's the teaching of Philippians 2:6 that I get into in much greater detail in my video on Philippians 2:6, in the playlist in the description to this video below, and in my writings available on ElihuBooks.com. So as we have shown, equality does not mean equal in every respect. It's dependent on the context. Here, the context is Jesus having the same nature or form as God, the character tes hypostaseos. Just like those who are resurrected in the spirit are equal to angels as spirits, in that context, not marrying because spirits don't marry. In this context, Jesus still having an equality with God or likeness, right? I keep saying equal because most translations say equal, and equal does not always mean equal in every respect. In fact, it frequently does not, as we just checked and showed, both from lexical sources and by example, from the New Testament and the Greek Septuagint. So just because Jesus had an equality with the Father, in John 5:18, likeness, John 5:19, in that he does what the Father does first in like manner. And because God is his own Father, as a real Son of God, the one who came forth from God, who was in the beginning with God, existed as a spirit like God, in the nature of a God or God, according to Philippians 2:6, that does not mean he shares the same essence of being, the same being equally, eternally, in all respects, with the Father. It does not mean he's equal in every sense with the Father. It means in context that Jesus is like the Father in doing what the Father does first, John 5:18 and 19, and that he's like his own Father as a spirit Son of God who existed in the nature of a God, which is the same nature as God, a spirit, but not the same being as God, a separate spirit who did not consider that equality, that likeness of being a spirit, the same way God is a spirit, as something to take advantage of, the way another spirit chose to do.